Policy implementation. It is represent the stage where government executes an adopted policy as specified by the legislation or policy action. This stage where the government executes an adopted policy as specified by legislation or policy action is known as the implementation stage. During this phase, the policies that have been formulated and approved by the legislative body or through policy actions are put into action by relevant government agencies and departments. At this stage, various government agencies and departments responsible for the respective areas of policy are formally made responsible for implementation. At this stage, which is the implementation stage of a policy, various government agencies and departments become formally responsible for carrying out the policies in their respective areas. Different government agencies and departments are assigned ownership of specific aspects or domains of the policy. Each agency takes responsibility for implementing and overseeing the policy within its designated scope. Responsibilities are divided among various government entities based on their expertise, jurisdiction, and mandates. Each agency focuses on the aspects of the policies that align with its area of competence. Policy implementation is what happens after it becomes a law. Policy implementation is the space in the policymaking process that occurs after a bill has been passed into law. It is the practical and operational stage where government agencies and departments take concrete action to put the policies outlined in the legislation into practice. Once a bill is enacted into law, it becomes the law basis for a particular policies. Implementation involves transactions, programs, and initiatives. Government agencies and departments are assigned specific responsibilities based on their expertise in jurisdiction. Adequate resources, both financial and human, are allocated to facilitate the implementation of the law. Definition of policy implementation. Policy implementation, it is the stage in the policy process where policy action occurs to address a recognized policy problem and have a desired effect. Policies are executed by respective administrative agencies. Policy implementation, it refers to the process of putting a government's adopted policy into action. It it is the stage in the policy cycle where legislation are carried out by relevant government agency and departments. Policy implementation is the practical and operational phase where policies move from the conceptual or legislative stage to actual execution. Selected instruments are applied reflective of the legislative mandate, bureaucratic interpretation and capacity, specified target population, and the society experience the first tangible effects of the policy once implemented.
Implementation policy process stage. Stages in policy process. So, itong stage na ito ay binuo ni John Well Kingdon. So, konting information about kay John Well Kingdon. Pinanganak siya noong 1940 at siya ay isang professor emeritus at isang acting chair of political science. Siya ay graduate sa Oberlin College and the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So, number 1 is agenda settings. Ito yung stage na kung saan ina-arrange ang mga issue at yung mga policy ba naman ay hindi. Number 2, policy recognition. In this stage naman ay dito nire-recognize o ina-acknowledge yung mga policy na nanggagaling sa mga issue na dinadala sa mga policy makers. So sa stage 3, policy generation. From the word generation or generate. Dito, inaalam ng mga policymakers ang mga maaring dahilan or maaring cause sa isang issue. Next is the political action. It was an action designed to attain purpose sa pamamagitan ng political power or sa pamamagitan ng activities in political channels. Number 5, policy formulation. This is the process by which is that guide decision making and action. 6 is the policy implementation. It presents the stage where government executes an adopted policy as specified by legislation or policy action. Next. Policy implementation is a policy, process, or procedure that are the most viewed broadly or pinakamalawak. Means in doing law, yung mga actors and mga organizations ay nagwo-work together to implement or adopt policy into effort to achieve program policy or program goals. Uses of policy implementation. First is the information. Ito ay upang ipaalam sa mga tao ang patakaran o polisiya na na-implement. Enforcement. Ito ay upang ipaalam sa mga tao na kapag sila ay lumabag sa polisiya na na-implement, ay may karapatang parusa or multa. Inducement. Para po sa mas madaling ma-adapt ng mga tao ang maaaring pagbabago sa kanilang nakagawiang gawain nang dahil sa polisiyang na-implement. Ngunit maaari din namang mag-alok ng mga benefits or incentives. Next po.
From the word policy failure, is a term that refers to the inability of policy to achieve the intended goals or outcomes. It occurs when the desired effects of the policy are not realized and leading to negative consequences or limited impact. And one of the common factor of the implementation or the policy failure is the implementation gap, which refers to the disparity between policy intentions and the actual practices and action to implement the policy. Next po. Types of policy failure. Non-implementation, a case wherein the policy is not put into effect as intended of various reasons. From the word non-implementation, it refers to the act of non-implementing or carrying out of particular actions or plan, and it can occur in various contexts such as government policies, organizational strategies, or individual decisions, and can be deliberate choice or reflecting a decision to not proceed with a certain course of action. The second is the unsuccessful implementation. From the word unsuccessful, it occurs when the policy is carried out in a full and external circumstances are not altogether favorable. From the word, it refers to the failure and can be attributed to a variety of factors such as poor planning and coordination and limited resources or resistance from the key stakeholders. Next po. Some factors of policy failures: diversity and pluralistic nature of society and
The policy cycle. Policy development and implementation are often described as distinct and separate stages within policy cycles. In practice, the lines between policy development and implementation can become quite blurred. Policy review. It is a procedure of evaluating the effectiveness of a specific policy. Policy development. It is a process of deciding what should be achieved, how to do it effectively and efficiency at sino ang mga involved sa process. Policy implementation. It is all about how a policy will be implemented, and the policymakers and frontline services are the one who is involved. During the policy development stage, both political and technical issues have to be addressed. Political issues include getting buy-in, setting a vision, and managing opposition. Technical issues include gathering evidence and data of what works, implementation planning, and other mandatory steps required in government policy development, including public consultation. There is no good way to implement bad policy. Poor policy design is a common reason for poor implementation. Likewise, a well-designed policy can be poorly implemented. The policy development stage is a crucial phase in the process of formulating government policies. It involves addressing both political and technical issues to ensure the successful creation and implementation of effective policies. Kung ang mga principles, goals, or mechanisms of a policy is poor, di magiging beneficial or successful ang isang policy process. Policy implementation is the stage in the policy process where government agencies and other relevant organizations put a policy into practice. It involves translating the goals and objectives of a policy into specific actions, procedures, and programs. Effective implementation is crucial for the successful achievement of policy outcomes and desired impacts. Policy implementation refers to the process of carrying out the goals and objectives outlined in a policy. It involves the translation of policy intentions into actions, often through the coordination of various government agencies. The stage of policy implementation is a critical phase in the policy-making process and follows the formulation and adoption of a policy. It represents the actual execution of the policy's goals and objectives as specified by legislation or policy action. During this stage, the government and relevant stakeholders work to put the policy into action, translating its intended outcomes into tangible programs and activities on the ground.
Key aspects of the policy implementation stage include first, coordination and collaboration. Ang successful implementation po ay kinakailangan ng multiple collaboration ng mga stakeholders and kabilang din ng mga government agency at non-governmental organization. Ang coordination naman ay dapat ma-establish upang matiyak ang tuloy-tuloy na pagtutulungan. And second is resource allocation. Resource allocation po ay kailangan na may sapat na mapagkukunan kabilang ang budgetary allocation and manpower. Halaga ito para sa successful implementation. Ang hindi naman po sapat na mapagkukunan ay hadlang sa pag-execute ng mga plan activities. Next po. Third is communication and public awareness. Ang clear communication policy ay para sa publiko at may mga kaugnayan sa stakeholders. Nakatulong itong public awareness para makakuha ng suporta at mapadali ang pagsunod. Monitoring and feedback mechanism. Ito naman ay pagsasabay-sabay sa pagpaunlad at pagpatupad na nagbibigay daan para sa napapanahon adjustment and correction. Ang feedback mechanism po ay parehong panloob at panlabas na tumutulong upang matukoy ang challenges at success po. And translation of policy goals. Ito naman ay mitiyak na aksyon at pamamaraan na maaaring ipatupad sa iba't ibang government agency, organization, or sa bawat isa. Next po. Ang policy evaluation naman ay dito ay na-apply ang mga principle and methods para ma-examine ang mga nilalaman at implementation or impact para sa policy. Administrative evaluation. Ang administrative evaluation is to assist supervisors in developing and strengthening their abilities through an assessment of their strengths and weaknesses.
Different techniques for administrative evaluation. Process evaluation is about exploring possibilities for making operating procedures more efficient. This evaluation analyzes how well a policy or program is being administered. It is employed more often by program managers to determine what can be done to improve the implementation, the aspects of service delivery of the program. Effort evaluation is assesses the amount of effort governments put into attaining their policy objectives in terms of budgets or personnel resources. Efficiency evaluation is about public policies cost and the ways of accomplishing the same goals at lower cost. It is concerned with the processes by which a plan is delivered to produce outputs. They are concerned with comparing the inputs with the outputs and determining how best to maximize outputs for the resources allocated. Effectiveness evaluation compares the intended goals of a policy with the ones actually achieved. It is a process of assessing the extent to which a program, policy, or intervention achieves its intended objectives or goals. It involves measuring the outcomes and the impacts of a program to determine whether it is producing the desired results and meeting the needs of the target population. Next, judicial evaluation is clearly different from administrative evaluation, as it is principally concerned with legal issues relating to the way in which policies are developed and implemented. Depending on political system, judicial evaluation is either initiated by the judiciary or when requested by individuals or organizations presenting a legal complaint against any given policy measure. It can declare a policy unconstitutional and ask the legislature to develop modification to it. Next, political evaluation. This evaluation form is based on a rather unsystematic and technically not very sophisticated way of gathering and interpreting information about public policies. It is not an evaluation activity in the classic sense, but rather a tool for depicting public policy in a positive or negative way. Ang purpose nito is this kind of evaluation is strongly related to aspects of party competition. Next. Scientific evaluation requires resources that are often not available to policymakers. It requires time and especially in situations where the findings are to be used for the formulation of public policy is difficult to provide. Time can also be an issue for this evaluation since the time frame of policymakers is limited by election periods and the fact that they want their policy successes to be backed by evidence before elections.
1967. Differentiate between formative and summative certain policy measure takes place at officers who may utilize the findings to make decisions about its continuation. Sa formative evaluation, ang purpose niya is like to monitor kung ano pa yung dapat gawin or ano pa yung ways na pwedeng gawin sa pag-improve ng isang policy. Tapos, ang summative evaluation naman, nangyayari siya after ma-approve ng isang batas or ng isang policy. Ang summative evaluation is like tinitingnan kung na-attain ba ng isang policy yung objectives niya or yung purpose niya sa pagpo-formulate po nito. Next po, economic evaluation. Economic evaluations involve the identification, measurement, evaluation, and then comparison of the costs or input and benefits or outcomes or impacts of two or more alternative policies. The costs and consequences of alternative interventions or scenarios are compared to find the best use of scarce resources, thus focusing on the efficiency of a policy. Sa economic evaluation, from the word economic po, dito na pumapasok yung involvement ng money. So, ang economic evaluation, it involves evaluations ng cost or ng inputs, yung benefits or outcomes, or dito pumapasok yung pag, paglalagay ng budget, ng enough budget sa isang policy. Next po. Three main types of economic evaluation. Cost-benefit analysis involves weighing the total expected cost against the total expected benefits of one or more actions in order to choose the best options. To this end, benefits and costs are often expressed in monetary terms and are adjusted for time value so that all flows of benefits and costs over time are expressed on a common basis in terms of their present value. Cost-effective analysis compares the relative costs and outcomes of two or more policies. It is distinct from cost-benefit analysis, which assigns a monetary value to the measure of effect. Cost-effectiveness analysis is often used in the field of health services, where it may be inappropriate to monetize health effects. Cost-utility analysis. It involves looking at whether an action should be undertaken. Ito yung tatlong main types ng economic evaluations na sa pagkuha ng sa pag-evaluate ng isang policy. Itong tatlong types na to, it's involved monetary terms kung paano i-evaluate ang isang policy, yung budget na ilalagay sa isang policy. Next po. Performance evaluations. Performance measurement can take into account either effectiveness or efficiency consideration. It may differ from the previous forms of evaluation with respect to the use of the information gathered. Since implementing actors and program managers are expected to be accountable for achieving the intended goals, it is also about the use of organizational resources relative to a predefined goal characterized by ongoing monitoring and reporting of policy accomplishment. Performance evaluation, from the words itself na performance, ang ina-evaluate dito yung performance ng yung performance measurement ng isang policy, kung ito ba ay naging effective or efficiency, at kung ano yung naging goals nito sa kung ano yung naging goals nito sa isang society. Sabi dito, it may differ from the previous forms of evaluation with respect to the use of information gathered. Kumbaga sa performance evaluation, sakop niya lahat ang formative at saka yung summative evaluation, saka yung economic evaluation para ma-define yung performance ng isang policy. Next po. That's all. Thank you po.